Amelia had always been a bit of an adventurer. She loved taking long drives, especially on quiet country roads. On a crisp autumn evening, she decided to explore a lonely road she'd never traveled before. The GPS led her into the heart of the dense, dark forest. Tall trees on either side of the road seemed to close in on her as she drove deeper into the wilderness. The headlights of her car cast eerie, elongated shadows, making the path ahead appear ominous. It was an isolated road, seldom used by anyone but the locals, and stories of it being haunted were whispered among the townsfolk. As Amelia continued, the woods grew thicker and the air turned colder. A deep sense of unease settled in her chest, but she pushed it aside. The adventure was part of the thrill. Her phone's GPS signal flickered and died, leaving her alone in the inky blackness. Amelia drove on, guided only by the narrow beam of her headlights. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her from the darkness. Shadows danced at the edge of her vision, and the forest seemed to come alive with whispers. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the middle of the road, illuminated by her car's headlights. It was a woman, dressed in an old, tattered gown. Her hair hung in disheveled clumps, obscuring most of her face. Amelia slammed on the brakes, heart pounding in her chest. The woman was so close that she could see her eyes, hollow, lifeless orbs that seemed to suck the light from the world. The woman raised a skeletal hand and pointed a bony finger deeper into the forest. Terrified, Amelia shifted the car into reverse and sped backward. The woman stood unmoving in the middle of the road, watching as Amelia retreated. Amelia drove back the way she had come, her heart racing. She finally emerged from the forest, panting and shaken, but something wasn't right. The forest behind her was no longer the one she had driven into. It was different, darker, more foreboding. She looked down at her odometer and realized with a growing sense of horror that she had driven for hours on that lonely road, farther than it should have been possible. The GPS on her phone still refused to work, and her calls to the police for help went unanswered. Turning around, Amelia made her way back to the woman in the road, but she was gone. In her place, the ghostly figures of a dozen other people, all dressed in tattered clothing, began to appear in the headlights. They stood silently, watching her with those same hollow eyes. Panicking, Amelia sped past them, racing deeper into the night. She tried to find her way out of the forest, but the road seemed endless, twisting and turning in on itself. Finally, she could take no more. She stopped the car, got out, and ran into the woods, screaming. The trees closed in around her, and the forest swallowed her whole. Amelia's car was found days later, abandoned on a lonely road deep in the forest. She was never seen again, and the road she had traveled became known as the Lonely Road, a place where the living were said to meet the lost souls of the forest, doomed to wander for all eternity.